Welcome to the Five Phenomenon Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hazing. Coming up on today's show, writer, director, editor Tomas Vengris. His new feature is called Motherland. It's playing the festival circuits, or whenever the festival circuits start back up. It was scheduled to be playing Chicago International Film Festival, but obviously that's not happening. But first up, what I watched this week. It's another quarantine edition where I watched a lot, trying to do my part. Started off the week with, I think some people are perversely watching their apocalyptic movie, so I put on World's End. Turns out that's more about the incipient drinking that follows when self-quarantined. Help. I saw Richard Lester's Help, which between Hard Day's Night and Help, I actually kind of prefer it, even though I did start reading some reviews of why it was dismissed at the time. And I mean, it's just this cool hybrid of, like, the Beatles doing more intense Monty Python Goon style humor, and it's a Bond parody too, and it's beautifully shot too. That's actually really the main reason. And I've had some debates with Ted Haycraft, the former guest and co-host. He's a huge Richard Lester fanatic, and he likes to talk about Hard Day's Night being the birth of the music video. And I think there's a strong argument that Help actually is the birth of the music video, the Alps sequences. Killing Them Softly, the Andrew Dominik film I watched, which I don't understand why people don't bring that movie up. That movie is so good. And especially there's this element to it where the majority of the movie's content, thematic content, is all coming from what's playing on TV and radio. And so in the week that Congress finally passed the stimulus to help everyone out for coronavirus, and there was debate about it being gamed, Killing Them Softly is all about grifting for the bailout in 2008. So on top of the fact, like, it has one of my favorite, or just amazing sound design, for something simple. I also went through going deep into even though Glenn Kinney says you can't call it vegetables, my vegetables list. I saw The Tribe, which is a 2014 French film that I had heard was pretty intense. It was, but it's amazing. It's really well done. It's about a French school and a French school for the deaf, and the movie is all done in sign language with no subtitles. And there's definitely a, like, Lord of the Rings, maybe a less stylized Clockwork Orange vibe of, just youth degeneracy. But it wasn't as rough as I thought. The other notable thing I thought was, like, the conceit really works. But at the same time, they have people who aren't deaf mute who just conveniently don't speak. I saw this 1927 movie, Berlin Symphony of a Great City, which I'd always heard was kind of a companion to Man with Movie Camera. It turned out it wasn't that way. And that's really the most interesting things I saw this week. Hope y'all are staying safe, staying inside. It's just the state. I continue to keep calm, plan out the rest of my day and not think too far ahead about what this means just for the industry in general. I mean, it does feel like no matter what happens, this is a body blow to the theatrical. I posted this on the Facebook page, but Jason Blum was on the Ben Shapiro podcast, and he was saying that basically he thinks this is variety in what plays in theaters is going to go down significantly, and the mid-budget movie is really going to be hurting after this. I don't know. I had this perverse, hopeful, naive idea that maybe the corporations would stop looking at the theatrical as a moneymaker, and they'd get out of it. And so we'd return to the American New Wave of the 70s, right before a corporation started taking over. I really don't think this is going to happen. I was hopeful. Oh, I forgot to mention The other interesting viewership of the week, speaking of the communal experience, some friends that I'm on an email chain with, we were originally going to get on Zoom or Skype or something and all watch Portrait of a Lady on Fire just because it just went up on Hulu altogether. We ended up just kind of doing an email thread commentary, which, I mean, for seeing it for the first time is probably not a good idea, but since I've seen it and loved it, experienced it the second time, I won't lie, it wasn't as communal as being in a theater, but I don't know how else we're supposed to watch a movie right now except by ourselves. So, on today's show is Tomas Vengris. He's a writer, director, editor. His first feature, Motherland, was playing the festival circuits and hopefully will continue to after all this goes down. His parents were from Lithuania, and as we talk later in the show, Lithuania is a big part of the subject of all of his shorts and Motherland itself too. But Tomas is also a very accomplished film editor. He's one of my favorite films he's done is called Kicks. Notably, he edited Macon Blair's film "I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore," which won the Dramatic Grand Jury Prize at Sundance in 2017. But he and I knew each other because we both, we briefly overlapped working for Terrence Malick on Song to Song. So I hope you enjoy this talk. Where are you in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I'm in Bed-Stuy.
Bed-Stuy. How long have you been there?
In this place like a year and a half or something.
Where were you? You were in LA for a bit, weren't you?
I was barely in LA. Um, I I was in Lithuania for a while, and then I was just sort of hopping back and forth between here and Lithuania.
Is that the finish
Um,
the movie?
yeah, it was for the movie, and then like, I mean, I'm still like right now. I just decided to be back here for a hot second, but I mean, I'm still going back and forth there a lot, so I'll probably be there in summer because we're developing another one over there, and um, it's just,
Are you doing
real
post and
jobs
like
are here.
are you doing like post and production and everything over in Lithuania?
For my movie, we edited everything in Lithuania just because I mean the costs are hugely different. We had a co-production with Germany, so we did sound in Hamburg and we did color in Latvia in Riga, which yeah, I mean the post facilities in the Baltics are not great. It's usually like it looks like a dude in a basement. I mean, like the best facility in all of Lithuania like is like this how it's like this how it's like it doesn't compare to anything you'd find in like any major city in the US. So but people still know their stuff. It's just it's very different. So I was happy to do sound in Hamburg, but
You're from Lithuania. Let's start off with there.
yeah, I was born in DC. I was born in the States. Both of my parents were came to the US in their 20s. And so I was born and raised in the US, and all of my summers uh, in Lithuania basically after the fall of the Soviet Union. So like 92 onward, I would just be sent out there for the summer.
Who would you stay with in the in
It depended. So like when I was very little, I'd be going with one of my parents usually, and we'd stay with family friends, um, or like kind of more distant relatives. It was usually family friends. There was a while where it was just these like my dad's friend had two kids, a daughter who was 1 year older and a son who was 1 year younger. So I just go out to the countryside with them, and they kind of like would take me for a couple months
are
or a
you
month or something.
in the States? Are you from was it DC area?
Yeah, Washington D.C. Exactly.
Washington, yeah, not one of the millions of suburbs of Washington.
I was a 202. I was D.C. I mean, I could walk to Maryland from my house, but I was in D.C.
So what were the movie theaters like in Washington that you first started going to?
Um, so there's one that still exists somehow, miraculously, right by my house. It's called the Avalon. It's an art house theater, plays a lot of independent foreign films. I'd say probably the best selection of movies in the DC area. There's also one in Georgetown that I'd go to a lot. I mean, it was mostly, mostly multiplexes and everything like that, but there was a few really, really nice ones. And the Avalon, which was right by us, is great. And it's like this really old theater with these like beautiful frescoes and like it's just I don't know, it must have been. I mean, I can't tell you the historical facts of it, but it was like it's one of those super old theaters with like the uncomfortable chairs, but just like the beautiful details everywhere. And they tried shutting it down a couple times, and the neighborhood just kind of came together and raised money for it, and so now it's completely independently run, and yeah, it's really cool. And so
Do you remember your first theatrical experience?
um, there's two early theatrical experiences that I remember very clearly. One of them was going to see Dances with Wolves and getting really upset because my mom kept covering my eyes because she wasn't aware how violent it would be, and I was getting really upset that she was covering my eyes.
Were you
And
you
so
like you're old enough to watch it? You thought?
I thought I was old enough to watch it. I mean, I was terrified by this like arrow riddled body and stuff, but I was very upset that she was covering my eyes. Um, and the other one was Home Alone. I remember that, and I remember laughing so hard uh, that I peed my pants a little bit, and I was embarrassed to leave the theater.
What do you, what do your parents? Sorry, what do your parents do?
Right. My mom was a radio broadcast journalist at the Voice of America. So she was speaking in Lithuanian to the Lithuanian listeners. You could only hear her in the U.S. with a shortwave radio, but she was a journalist, and of course, the Voice of America was like this like for her it was like a patriotic job because when it was formed. When she started working there, it was during the Soviet Union. For them, it was like this, one of the few to get non-Soviet news or news from the West. But after the Soviet Union fell apart, it became kind of useless, and I think they eventually closed down the European division. Um,
Who was
and my
taking
dad
you?
works for the,
Oh, sorry. What
sorry.
your dad? What was it?
Well, my dad works for the Food and Drug Administration. He's just a little science geek,
Would,
virologist
were they the
by
ones taking you
training.
to movies?
Yeah, they were. I mean, it's interesting because I didn't realize until I was an adult how good my parents' taste in movies was. I mean, my dad would, my mom was working nights frequently, and I remember like, watching, like just like hanging out with my dad while he was like watching things on HBO, and I have like visuals of these movies that were like clearly very, um, I mean, like some strange things were like my parents got in a fight because my dad brought home fish called Wanda for like a family viewing experience, and we were both, my sister and I were tiny, and I was like, we can't show this to the kids. But yeah, I mean, we weren't allowed to watch TV growing up, but I think for the most part, my mom kind of spearheaded what we watched. And as far as I remember, it was mostly like old westerns, Hepburn movies that we had on VHS. So it was like Magnificent Seven and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were my two favorite movies when I was a kid.
Okay.
Uh, and But then like I remember as a young adult or something, I remember I guess it was Netflix when I went to college and Netflix started. My dad and I would my dad got me a Netflix subscription, and we started like sharing movies, and I was like, his list is amazing, and he's like calling me, be like, oh, there's this movie Fish Tank I think you'd like, and I was like, parents don't, most parents shouldn't be, or like parents of my peers shouldn't be watching it. My mom went to see Melancholia in theaters 4 times. I mean, she'd like, yeah,
Four
it's
times.
crazy. Yeah, although there's something weird with that one. Something struck a nerve for her because she's also like obsessed with. I mean, for her real style is like Victorian era, like masterpiece theater. That's like that really gets her going. But she went to see Melancholia 4 times in theaters, which is
So
a
you
little
guys didn't
crazy.
share stuff until you left for college?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about. I mean, there wasn't. I don't know. My parents, maybe that's like part of this colder Eastern European thing, but like it's not something they were. very focused on like giving us some sort of like cultural education. You know, growing up in DC, one of the nice things is you have the Smithsonian, so we were going to museums every weekend. They take us to like, you know, whenever, like we'd get standing room tickets for like opera and ballet a lot. Because I feel like that they felt like that was like an obligation, but maybe for them movies wasn't, it was more entertainment than anything else. So it's not something that they sort of had any active, they didn't seem to like put any kind of like, I don't know,
Did they
active
did they treat
active education.
the movies as a big art because they clearly liked them?
I don't think so. I think for them it was still a slightly different category. It was still more entertainment. It wasn't, at least it wasn't something that they would feel like we need to teach our kids about this. They were, they certainly were uh, very focused on keeping the like quote unquote like garbage away from us. Like, you know, we weren't allowed to watch TV. I'd like sneak in my MTV viewings because both my parents worked, so I had a few hour window where I was
That's when TV came in.
yeah, where I could where I could do it, but you know, I'd have to like I'd like flatten out the cushions so it didn't look like anybody had been sitting on the on the couch, and like remember which channel it was on to put it back to that channel,
Wow.
all that. Yeah.
What did you see movies in Lithuania?
Yeah. I mean, so I've seen a I mean, when I was spending my summers there, obviously movie, you know, you're in the countryside for the most of the time, you're outside, and most of them, and like if it was a rainy day or something like that where we would go to the movies, it would most a Hollywood movie that, you know, my Lithuanian friends wanted to see. It was a little later where I started watching older Lithuanian films. I was like probably post college when I started uh watch like kind of I don't know, paying attention to to more of that world. I mean, obviously, like we had seen because of my for my parents, you know, the Soviet, you know, my mom knew Tarkovsky. She didn't love him, but like I think we saw something that I watched. I think maybe Solaris I watched at home when I was, you know, a teenager or something like that. But I mean, my mom wasn't a huge fan of Tarkovsky. She said it was like all the cool kids when she was growing up would. She's like, it's just something that like the
It's
cool boys would like talk about to pretend they understood when they didn't.
like it's the Russian David Foster Wallace or Chuck Palahniuk.
Exactly.
Um,
Um,
so when did you start pushing and watching stuff on your own, or developing your own kind of stuff you what
yeah,
you liked?
there was a couple movies that I remember kind of like changed things for me. I remember I watched, I think it was Raising Victor Vargas. It was like the first kind of like gritty indie film that I saw.
Huh.
Uh,
What about that one in particular?
I don't know why. I think I was in high school. Maybe I'm confusing this with something else. There's a few like movies where I was like, well, so I mean, it was kind of it was kind of two things at once. I mean, there was first of all there was realizing that there were movies that were different, which like I don't know, it wasn't really on my radar, but I'd say like filmmaking brought me into films more than films brought me into filmmaking, which is kind of a weird backwards thing, but I had a really close friend. I mean, I played with toys for an embarrassingly long time. Like me and I had a friend, we'd play like dress up or Legos or micro machines. Like for we were well into high school
Okay.
before we put that stuff down, and we reached a point where it's like we knew that we shouldn't still be playing, um, but we were playing nonetheless. And Dad was a big geek, and he had all this camera equipment and just like any kind of tech thing. So he had a video capture card, which you know, back then you couldn't just like shoot something and then plug it into your computer and edit it. But they had a video capture card and a camera, and at some point we had the realization, because we like, you know, what we'd usually do is like, you know, dress up and like wander around in the yard or whatever. And there's like reaching a point where like that's embarrassing. If a neighbor sees us, we can't do that. So we were like, oh, if we bring this camera out, we're just making a movie. We're not that's allowed. We can play if we're filming it. And it kind of started from there where like I remember like doing these like we had like our micro machines and these models, and we dressed up and we kind of were intercutting, you know, like my friend is like running down the stairs of the garage, and it was like this, like, I even remember what the shot looked like, and it wasn't intentional, but it's like this beautiful backlit silhouette, and because it was back, like the sun was coming behind him, you couldn't even see there was a kid. You just saw the silhouette of a gun with this uniform, and it looked really badass. And we like cut that with like, this like aerial of this like model town he had with these like Micro Machine tanks, and it was really cool.
Well,
And suddenly I was like,
how were you cutting this stuff?
so I think it was like either like the first premiere, or maybe it was a thing called Pinnacle, but his dad had, so we had basically this video capture card that could bring it into, like, it was like the earliest, I don't know, this was probably like, yeah, I don't even know, late 90s, early aughts. And so we could bring it, we figured like, so I mean, we knew like what the razor tool was, and we knew how to like move clips, and that's what we did. Um, and for that, those first things, we probably weren't even cutting it, to be honest. We were probably just like cutting in camera.
Okay,
Um,
that was my question because a lot of
yeah,
you seem like you're on the bridge of like needing to cut in camera versus like maybe
yeah,
being able to do
yeah,
some of this digitally. But I cut off.
yeah.
You were going to tell me about another shot that after the badass silhouette shot.
Oh no, no, and then we just like did like this aerial of like the models and stuff, and we were watching it, and it was just so cool. And that's kind of what brought me to being like, oh, there's something here that's like combining all of my interests even at that age, because I was like, because with this same friend, we used to like do like long comic strips, of like, we were kind of like, the dorky kids in school, but we had a lot of these sort of fun things, and it's like, and he became an actor, and it's kind of funny that we both sort of
W-
followed those paths.
Were you into what were you reading as a teenager, or were you into comics or anything?
I was not into comics. I was not into comics because I wasn't I even like I wasn't allowed anywhere near them, because my mom called them little monsters, and she didn't understand what these like it was a hard sell for my Eastern European parents, that there's like these like strange mutant toys where, she thought so anyway, like, so I'd had like a couple X-Men figures that I gotten out of trades with friends.
Well, what kind of literature were you reading then?
I mean, my for like my
I'm curious what kind of writing influences you would have gotten in your teen years.
yeah, no, so I mean, it's like preteen. I remember there was like, we had this thing at the local library where you had to like read a certain amount of books in the summer. So that's when it was like you'd get prizes, and like if you read a certain amount of books, you got like tickets to like a Caps game. And so especially my dad was like, you need to get that prize. So, but that meant I could read whatever I wanted, and I think it was mostly like World War II books. I read Star Wars books, but I think that was a little later. Like, this is like, the non-school stuff. So
Yeah.
of course, I had to read all the school stuff, and what was deemed academically beneficial. But when it came to me, there was like there's a book that still, it's called like Blood of Eagles or something. It was like this like kind of like historical fiction, I'd say mostly. There's one about, there's like, I can still remember the covers of these, and there was one that I've tried Googling a lot since then, because I remember the story quite well. But it was like about a kid. It's like about a teenager in California whose family, I think, is Afghani, and he goes back with his, and like, but he's like a skater in like Southern California, and for some reason, or like maybe he lives with his mom, he has to go back with his dad to Afghanistan. He gets like caught up in this insurgent fighting the Soviets. And it's like, it was like pulp. It was like garbage. I remember trying to write a book report about one of them. My teacher's like, "This isn't a real book. Like, you can't write a book report about this." But like for that one, I really connected, because I was like an American kid with immigrant parents, and like he was fighting, and this kid was fighting like the Soviets, and that was like my dream as a Lithuanian, like to be pulled back into some conflict where I can fight the Soviets. Uh, which is funny, because this is obviously pre-America having, anything. Being
Right.
an insurgent in Afghanistan
Yeah.
when this book was written was the good guys,
Kind of
because
like
you're fighting
the
Soviet
Rambo. Was
Union.
it Rambo 3? Is
Right.
Rambo with the Taliban?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a war or do you like war movies or do you have a war movie you want to make or something like that?
I do. I mean, so it's like my secret dream to like direct action movies. Um, yeah, I do. I mean, I do. It's I
I did not know this about you, especially having like yeah. I mean, I've really only seen Squirrels, the only thing of yours I've seen, but like
right.
I had knowing that style.
Yeah, I was funny. I was just rewatching The Saint the other day
The Val
because I'm
Kilmer
doing
one?
research. Yeah, because this was a favorite movie of mine, and as when I was like 10 years old, whenever it came out, I remember, and I was like too young. I remember so clearly. Oh God, there's so much. I saw it on, I don't know if it's like Netflix or HBO Go. It's on one of the streaming things, and I'm working on there's a producer here in New York that asked me to write a treatment for something because yeah, there's an investor, and it's in that more of that vein. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna rewatch some of these old movies that I hadn't thought about in ages. Because yeah, I mean, most of what I watch now is most of what I go out of my way to watch is uh,
What were your
subtitled
other
character-driven drama.
what were
But
your other research titles you watched?
for this right now,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, I watched Shane and I watched The Saint. That's all I've watched for this in particular because it's this like fish out of water that has a very very Western feel, but it's like a good assassin kind of thing,
Okay.
kind of movie. But the tone of it is very Western and this kind of like stoic character with the cold-blooded killer type. I mean, who knows? It's just I was happy to watch these two things
I was more
and
asking because I wanted to know what the junk action movies from your teen years were, or if there was a better list of those.
I don't know. I don't think I wasn't that like I didn't have that deep. I mean, as a teenager, we would watch like Where Eagles Dare, Guns of Navarone. It was like these like old war movies.
So it wasn't
Were
necessarily contemporary stuff. Your parents' influence
No, it was
on.
mostly old, and so the war movies were not coming from my parents. That was coming from a friend's parents who had like a deep like we'd watch all these World War II documentaries. We were kind of obsessed with well, like his family was obsessed with or his side, because his like grandfather was a British Royal Air Force pilot, and I was anything that was anti-Soviet was good on in my book. So, wherever those two things merged, especially. So World War II would be more like the things that his parents kind of VHS library. But I mean like the thing is like I mean my screen time was it's funny to say that my screen time was very limited. I mean my parents were very active about like not letting me sit in front of the TV too much, not letting me watch too many movies because that, to them it was still, you need to be outside and play and I was totally fine with that. So friends' houses was where I got most of it, and then at home, and we would have like movie nights. I mean, it was mostly older movies, and yeah, there'd be a lot of discussion. Me and my sister knew, like when we would pick out movies at the video store, that was right around the corner from me. We knew what our parents would nix and what they wouldn't, so we still had a pretty tight.
So did you go to?
Um,
You went to Columbia, right?
I did.
Was it immediately for filmmaking?
No, no. Undergrad does not have a filmmaking major. There's a film studies major, but it's all theory and there's no production classes. So, I mean, at that point, even before college, knew that I was interested. Like, I knew it was on my radar. Making movies was something that interested me, and I had a really good friend who went to NYU undergrad. But again, this was something that, the strict immigrant parents were just like, there's no way you're going to film school. I was 17 when I started college anyway, and they're like, you're too young to make you're too young to ruin your life this early.
Did you
Was
skip
kind
a
of
grade, or did you just get in?
they just put me in as soon as they could. Again, both parents working, they wanted to get us in school as soon as they could. So there was no, but I took several film classes, and I mean, film theory, but it was a little annoying. I remember, I took the first one, I really loved it. Like they started showing the same Eisenstein films over again, and I was like, I want to watch something interesting. But I would go to a lot of these. Became friends with one of the TAs who was like a Columbia Film School MFA student, and so I got on like a mailing list for all like these like screenings and guest lectures that would come. So there was like I try to get into these more interesting screenings, and Columbia did have like a cool, as like a bi-weekly film screenings for various kind of European or independent films that I'd go to, and we still turned it like bring a flask and watch some random movie and then go out afterwards.
Was this? Did you have a desire to get to New York too, out of the top of this, or?
I really wanted to be in New York. Um, I don't know why. I just felt like my high school in DC was sort of right in the middle of the city, and at the time I decided that I didn't want to do like I couldn't go to. I mean, again, this is like 16, 17-year-old me deciding that like, oh, I can't go to like a country club for college. I need to be like in a city where there's all this action. I don't know if that was like the smartest choice. I think that like rural campuses have there's a lot more kind of, there's something about that like enclosed student environment where there's a lot more ability to like be creative and things that like, the best, my comparison is where my sister went to school, like the best actors, the best dancers, the best, in retrospect, I think there's a huge advantage to going to like a rural camp that are like more set apart and like from a big urban environment, because where my sister went to college, everybody, the best actors or the best dancers would be in school productions, whereas at Columbia,
You're
if
just
you're a good actor,
you're
you're
distracted
going to
by the
be,
city. I'm
yeah, or like if you're a good actor, you're going to be in a Broadway show, like Julia Stiles. That's why like these like big names were in school with us, because like they could still maintain their professional careers. So if you're, I knew a lot of people that were like, they were interested in film, so they weren't making movies at school. They were interning for like major production. They were like interning for Miramax or something.
I live right by this college called the University of Evansville, and it's actually got a relatively renowned theatrical department. And I was talking to one of
Hmm.
the professors, and she was telling me that their schedule allows it. They used to go 7 days a week, but it's 6 days a week. They give them Sundays off, but she just kept telling me over and over. It's hard to explain how filled their schedules are, and it's a renowned department. Like Rami Malek is the
Hmm.
most famous alumni
Wow.
from there.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, um, so. Were you making films while at Columbia?
Yes. Yeah, I was part of the Columbia television station as a freshman. It had gone defunct for like 5 or 6 years, and as a freshman, someone I knew restarted it, and they're like, we just need content, we just need anything, and it was just like as a TV station, and they just had like, so basically one channel. It just had a channel on the campus wide cable, so any sort of dorms or anywhere else is like channel 9 was the Columbia television station.
This is intercampus. It's not broadcast anywhere else.
No, it was just on campus. But because I knew how to use a camera and I knew how to do basic editing from my little games in high school, and those games, other things, we had some interesting things came out of those games. But anyway, so in college, I knew how to use camera. I was like, oh, this sounds cool. So me and a couple friends started doing whatever. I mean, like weird random ads. So we would do like ads for like shows or just promotional, like watch CT, and and so it was just playing. There was like a green screen, so we did like this like little ad for our like the late night eatery night place where you get like cheesesteaks and candy at like 3 in the morning with your Columbia card. So we just did like a green screen of like three stoned kids like flying around like these like and like cutouts of like massive gummy bears and stuff. And then we also made like what we thought were like serious artistic short films that would probably be super embarrassing
Do
to
you
revisit.
do you want to talk about those embarrassing art films?
So I mean it's tragically, my hard drive died the year after college, and I was like, at the time, I had no money, and I was still like ready to pay $1,000 for recovery, but they said they couldn't recover it. And I took it to one place, and I took it to another place. I'm sure that dead drive still lives on somewhere, but it was like early digital era where you don't know that you need to have two copies of everything and all that. So all of that stuff is, I mean, I have no access to it, so I just have these like, you know, visuals,
The
like
tr-
these little memories of it.
the tragedy on my end was I remember some of my college shorts were actually pretty decent, or I would not be embarrassed by them today. But
Mm.
they were so big that, and transportation was at the way it was. There was no way to get them off the hard drive. Like,
Wow.
I forget what was that. It was bigger than a floppy disk. It was bigger or than a small floppy disk, but it was a thing that you get like 100 megs or something on it. And I remember at one point I was going to try to bug a friend to be like, "Can I put this on your iPod and get it off?" Because I think it was like we couldn't go over the 2 gig limit or anything or something like that.
Right,
And
right, right, right.
yeah, and then just so like I remember there was this ticking clock at the end of the semester where they were, I don't know if they
Hmm.
were going to wipe the drives or what, but it was gone, just gone. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
Ugh. I mean, I still have all the DV tapes that has all the footage.
you think about
I know.
re-editing them, trying to reassemble them?
I don't think it's gonna happen. But I did find my old camera. I had like a Canon GL1, and I built a depth of field adapter for it because this is obviously before DSLRs.
Okay.
Um, and it was crazy. I just like, I found this blog where you takes you through all the steps, and it's like you add extension cubes and a little. I didn't have one with a mirror, so when I filmed, everything was flipped and upside down. But you get like extension tubes and then like an adapter, extension tubes and an adapter to put on these. I had these Canon FD lenses for my dad's AE1, like photo SLR, and um, and I had to order this thing off eBay from this like German guy that like fit into the extension cubes that had a little motor attached that like vibrated, so you could add this. Anyway, so I could have like shallow depth of field. I like found like created this like super. I had to like learn to solder to like get the battery to work. It was crazy, and I found that attachment. But
When did you do this?
this was maybe senior year of college or maybe the year after college.
Okay.
I was in New York, and I was yeah. So because it was basically like I think like I put in like 6 months of free time to like figure out this thing. I mean, obviously not working all the time, but like ordering these pieces and putting it together. And then like a year or two later, the 5D was introduced to the market and
Oh.
became a completely useless tool. But it was very cool. I mean, the image is just like because it had this like very unique kind of look to it, just like this kind of grainy, slightly distorted, but like super shallow.
Do you ever use it anymore?
So I found it recently, like the last year or so, in storage, and I don't know. I was thinking about it. I don't know. I think the problem would be to get the Canon GL1 to be working, not the adapter. But
Hmm.
also, like, I don't even know what I would attach to. I mean, I guess any mini DV camera, but it'd be interesting.
I've been trying to transfer all my old mini DV tapes just because I mean, if I have a vague idea of doing something with mixed media, and I shot a ton of stuff back in the day that I knew was just going to be templates or like
Huh.
stuff to mix together. But like my old mini DV, I have some friends who will give me one, but my mini DV player just has a straight line through it and I can't see shit. So, what did you do after
Yeah.
Columbia?
I did some like a few film internships, but I remember one year where I was like had a free internship for this production company, and I was like literally squatting in a frat house. I had a friend who was in a frat who said there were empty rooms, and I was just like sleeping on the couch of an empty room in a frat house and like eating like street hot dogs because my parents were like, if you're staying in New York, we're not going to pay for you to be there. It was a bit contentious, my desire to be in film, especially at that time. It was not a welcome uh,
Was
career path.
was it a hostile like unwelcomeness?
No, it was, I mean, at that point, it was just like, this is stupid. You can't survive off that. Because, my parents didn't know anybody, especially growing up in DC and being immigrants, they didn't know anybody they didn't know anybody in the US in the creative fields. A lot of my parents' Lithuanian friends were artists, but in Lithuania, they came from the Soviet Union where being an artist was like the highest career because nobody had any money, but at least you were supported by the state. So being an artist had a lot of respect and all that, and they thought in the U.S. it's just it's impossible, I guess.
I was my
Uh,
parents were kind of very similar in regards, but they weren't. They, they kind of just like hope for the best, and they never openly said anything. Like
right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, in theory they were supportive. Like they just, but it was a similar situation. They just never knew anyone who made a living off this, and I mean, I think that
Yeah,
was their main concern.
for sure. Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was. Well, it was hostile later on. There was a moment where it was hostile because I had my like fancy job and all this. So I went into corporate. I was in consulting for a few years. And it got hostile when I quit that, and I was like, no, I'm doing film. That's where because like for my parents, it's like I had a nice job. Like, their job was done.
What was the
I had a
job?
it was marketing strategy consulting. It was at a company. It was a small boutique consulting company. It was started by a couple McKinsey partners who decided to do marketing strategy consulting, and it was new because it was like personality based marketing. So they were like one of the few, the first companies, as far as I know. I mean, whatever. That like were using a lot of. They were combining like surveys with online user data and seeing where people like what people said they like to do and then what they actually did, and like figuring out what kind of personalities were the most profitable to target for different Fortune 500 companies.
How
So
long did you last?
I was there for about 2 years, but all of my free time was like, I'd buy a camera, I'd do this, I'd rent lights. So I'd make little shorts. I'd make my roommates act in these little shorts. So like my like iBanker roommates, like they're like 5 free hours of the weekend. I'd like be like, all right, now I gotta act in this thing for me.
Mm.
And one of those little videos ended up being my submission that got me into AFI a year or two later.
What was the anything notable about that besides getting to AFI with it?
I mean, I kind of like, I recently rewatched it and I was into it. I was like, at the time I was terrified. I was like, oh, this sucks. I think that, as like anything, like your your skills don't match your taste. And so I thought it was awful, but I didn't have anything else. So I didn't even finish it. But
Oh,
then when I was applying to AFI, I was like, well, I need to submit something. So I cut it down and then submitted just whatever because I had to submit something. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was about, I mean, it was something that was all around me, but I lived in a really nice apartment because it was like a friend parent bought an apartment, stay there for like live there for a year. I mean, we were paying rent to them, but barely anything relative to the cost of this apartment. It was like a beautiful big apartment in Tribeca. So like the nicest place I ever lived or ever will live when I was 21 years old.
mm.
Um, but so we shot this, and we had a lot of friends from that world who, like, right off the bat, they were finishing college and they were finding themselves like,
Underemployed.
no, no, this is like the opposite. This is like spoiled Upper East Side girls that were graduating college and like finding themselves like 30-year-old hedge fund managers and getting married, and like, and you could just like imagine their lives going that like they're gonna be fucking the tennis pro in
Mm.
10 years. Like you could just see they were just like, it wasn't all of them, but there was a few of people that I knew from college that just like you could just see they just got like sucked right into that world where like, okay, now they're gonna move to Connecticut or Westchester and be in the country club and make babies for this guy who's gonna start, anyway, and you could already, and we could see it in our jobs because the people, my roommate and I banker one worked at a law firm, and you could see like these older managers that are like clearly sleeping with the HR. It was just like a really quick insight into this like very cynical world of like super wealthy New York corporate whatever. So that short was about my friend, my roommate, I think her roommate was basically playing his boss, and an actress friend of mine was playing this like young, lonely housewife whose husband's never home, and she lives in this big, beautiful apartment by herself. She's just alone, and it's like her kind of fantasizing, her having like it's like cuts back and forth between like her coming home uh, after, we don't know what she's coming home from, but coming home alone, pulling out some leftovers in this big, beautiful kitchen, and like cutting back and forth to her on this date with this duker who my friend played perfectly. Just perfect, really, really captured that douchey banker quality. And it's just like intercutting the two. And then you think she's just on a bad date. You think she's lonely. She's just like a lonely young woman on a bad date. And then, you see shots that she's in the bathroom with this guy, like implied sleeping with this guy at the end of the bad date. So you're like, why is this person doing that? And then you realize that her husband comes home and she's just like her older husband comes home and she's just bored and doesn't know what else to do with her life. It's very just like kind of intercut, a lot of like extreme close-ups because I had a macro lens that I just wanted to play with. So it's like
Mm.
her eyeball and like walking around and stuff like that.
I did want to talk about the AFI experience. So AFI is what, 2 years or more?
Yes, it's a 2 year program.
You went in for
They spit
directing.
you out after 2 years. I did.
What was it? I mean, what was it for? This is your first time in LA too, I assume.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever been to LA before that. I mean, I went to visit. Yeah, but I moved to LA for the first time, and yeah,
Okay, so you
for
hadn't been there
AFI.
before, but I mean,
Mhm.
is it? I mean, because AFI it seems to me like is just better. Like the stuff coming out of it's better than the other schools, to my eyes. Or at least the shorts are coming out when you see them at a festival.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly. I mean, I think what AFI definitely gives you is like a very solid. You just got a very solid foundation in storytelling. And I think with every film school, it depends. Like there's still going to be like the people that rise to the top, like the best people rise to the top. And AFI is hard because like they make you do a certain type of like it's not great. It's hard to make like a good festival short, I think, at AFI because anything you do have a 3 act structure. They're not going to let you do a thesis film that's like less than 15 minutes because you don't have time to do a 3 act structure. Whereas I think most festival shorts, the standard format for a festival short is like basically like intriguing setup with a twist. And
Yeah,
so like, the ideal festival short is like 8 minutes, takes you one way,
I heard
big
Kevin Smith
twist,
compare it to
social.
just telling a joke, where you just have to
Yeah,
have a setup and a punchline.
exactly. That to me seems like that is like the festival short, and you couldn't get away with that at AFI, which everybody was like, they just didn't allow you to do that. But it does set you up for. I mean, they're very. It's like figure drawing. I felt like AFI was really great because people that are no into NYU, they get to really experiment. They get to get crazy, and that's fun. But and you get to experiment surrounded by like the most talented faculty. But AFI was very much like these are at least when I was there. These are the basic. This is the foundation of storytelling and of direct. And like you really learn the craft of directing. Even like when I was in Lithuania and talking to these Lithuanian film students, like they get like one director per year is kind of like their mentor, and so they just like learn one director's kind of like individual vision and approach to filmmaking. Whereas at AFI was very much like this is the craft. As a director, these are your tools, and it very much felt like a craft. Like these are if a scene is going wrong, this is how you can fix it. And I remember, we'd have several of our teachers were TV directors who like were craftsmen. They're not the ones coming up with the visual imagery. They're not the ones coming up with this like artistic vision. They're the ones that need to execute. And I think especially for me, that was really useful. I mean, even still, I like to experiment and get weird, but
Yeah.
at least having that basic knowledge of that it is a craft, and that there is like a skill set and there's something you can actually learn, and
Were you
those are
editing your
muscles that you need to exercise.
Were you editing your stuff at AFI, or were you having to hand it off to
We
somebody
were
else?
we were not allowed to. A director was not allowed to touch the Avid, um, which was frustrating at first, but then like very is a great lesson also. At first, I was like, I can edit better than any of these people. Why are they making me sit back and not edit? Then you realize how nice it is to have someone else do their take of something,
Mm.
and like having those fresh eyes and what you get out of that was super helpful. But yeah, it was you're not allowed to. And beforehand, I shot, I wrote, I produced, I edited, I did everything because there was, I'd get sometimes there were some friends involved, but not being allowed to do anything else was kind of nice.
Were you editing anybody else's stuff during this time, or was it strictly directing?
When I was at AFI, I would take like little like weekend gigs. I had a friend from high school who was working at a production company called Dakota Films. They did like Flight of the Concords and some really cool stuff. But they'd have he'd like throw me little gigs for the weekend. So like cutting together like a little commercial for like Virgin wines that would be shown on like the airline. So it was like,
Is that
it was
why
like half
there's
a
all
day of
this
work.
weird stuff at the bottom of your IMDb, like that, like MTV Award stuff, or
Yes, that's exactly
there's like a
right.
Bill Maher thing I think on your bottom of
Yeah.
your IMDb.
That
Um,
is all that stuff. When I was at AFI, that was how I'd make my drinking money.
so was California was your thesis film?
It was, yeah.
And what was that?
It was about a Lithuanian immigrant. It was basically about like a Lithuanian immigrant in who arrives to find he's searching for his brother, and he arrives in LA where his brother lives, and he surprises his brother in LA. And he came illegally from Lithuania, and he got involved with some sort of illicit driving of contraband. He's a truck driver, and he shows up with this massive 18 wheeler to his brother's house, and he needs to drop it off somewhere. We don't know the details about what's in the truck. We just know that it's ominous and that he has a bag full of cash.
How long was it?
There's 23 minutes, the runtime.
Were you able to get a little bit of a 3 act or something? A little.
Yeah, it was very, I mean, like, that's the thing. I think, like, one of the bigger criticisms you could make of the short is that it's too much stuffed into a short, like, and
Mm,
it was based off an idea I had for a feature. Um, It was actually based off of a friend of mine. I had a friend in Lithuania who he lived here illegally for 4 or 5 years and he became a truck driver, and he was driving 18-wheelers around the country, and he was like working for the shady guy. Of course, I embellished a lot. Um, and he never moved to LA. His brother was in Florida, but so and I had this idea for a feature based on that, and so I just kind of tried shoving that all into this short.
I mean, did you do the thing where you made the short and you had the script in tow for the feature already, or
No, I didn't. I mean,
you're just ready to develop it if someone was into the
I
short?
had an outline. I was ready. I'd started all that stuff, but really, Terry screwed all those plans up because I was hired right away to work for Mr. Malick in Austin right after graduating. So
Right after
I was able to
graduating?
go to. I was literally my interview with Mark was the day before my graduation.
This would have been Mark Ishikawa.
Hmm.
Was this to work on Night of Cups, or
Yeah.
okay? So you did work on Night of Cups.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, you just moved out to Austin that summer.
Yeah, yeah. Under that summer, I got to go to the Seattle Film Festival. I think actually I'd already gotten because we in California played in a bunch of festivals, and I only got to go to one. It was my only festival experience.
That's a bummer.
Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of missed out on a lot of things, but
Well, how many years did you end up working for Terry?
I worked for Terry. I want to say 3.5 years,
Okay. Were you done
3 years.
after? Were you done after? Did you finish up Song to Song?
Song to Song. So I left when we all had to leave for Song to Song, like when Song to Song was quote unquote finished.
Okay. I'm trying. I think that was after my time because I was only on Song to Song for about a month and a half. So and it was in the very
Yeah, so I
middle.
left with me, AJ, and Keith all finished up, and so the Voyage of Time people stayed on and may or may not have
What was
actually finished.
what was your experience getting into Austin like?
It was great. Um, I had never, as an East Coast kid, I had never imagined living in Texas, and I had all of like the sort of East Coast kid stereotypes of Texas, and I remember being like blown away by Austin. I loved it. It was very cool at first because I was working nights, and so night shift was actually the best.
Oh, I was night shift forever there too, and yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, did you? I did a lot of my thing with night shift was I would. I remember I did fill a card with five stuff, and I could do experiments, and I
Hmm.
could do my own stuff, but also I'd have assignments, but I'd be allowed to have experiments. Was it similar with you?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It was most, I mean, we'd had to, and especially when you start there, it's like you just have all this beautiful footage, and even if you're doing select reels, like it's great. And you're hanging out with your friends, and you're doing experiments, and you're showing each other what you did, and like the office is empty, and there's no stress, and nobody's stressed about anything. It's just like a really beautiful environment. Just like hanging out with other film kids that are doing interesting things, and you're just showing each other your little cuts that may or may not ever get seen or used or whatever. But
Sure. The thing I miss more about that place is that there was a genuine feeling that like openness that I've never had on any other film where like we genuinely want to try to change the language of film. We want to do something
mm,
legitimately different and try it, and that works too, not just artiness or experimentation for experimentation's sake. And like people were interested in it, and we developed a language where we actually could talk about it.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There's an idealism there that at least from the perspective, I don't know. For me, it was more when I started there. There's like this idealism or like an idealistic approach to filmmaking. But I mean, I've been lucky to work on movies since then where the directors are also, as an editor, where like the directors also want to do something different and are able to, like I've been able to sort of on a few projects get this like nice balance of an independent film that has a little bit of money, so it's comfortable to work or it's possible to work
Mm.
um, and live, and also have a desire to do something like different and groundbreaking. It's not nearly at the level of experimentation that is possible on a Malick film, but still that desire is there.
Around this time is when you shot Squirrel. Is when you first got to Austin, or in the middle, or
It was in the middle. It was maybe towards the end. I mean, it was middle towards the end. It took a long time because we had one day off a week, and so I'd shoot a few hours
I
once
remember
a week.
recognizing a shot in there outside the office.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One of the shots kind of was just like right where we do our little evening walks. Uh, just right up there where the highway turns. You just put the camera right where the
Yeah.
highway's coming. Then there's the I was driving home and I had this little black magic in my backpack and I was driving home and there was a softball game again right around the corner from the office. And I just pulled over and got some shots of that. It was really interesting. I mean, part of it was just like being overworked and like on someone else's project where I was like, I just need to do something for myself. And like in a weird way, stealing the approach of like just use natural light, just find things and kind of like make the story in the edit. I think like that's one of the big things I learned. I feel like Terry's unwittingly discovered this like the this amazing way to make a no budget film. You just need to have it just needs to be the right film where it's
Right.
like you need to have actors that are available and want to work with you, you know, over a long period of time because we shot Squirrel over. I mean, it was months and months because we didn't even at first I was just shooting things and then I was like, what finding the story and then after the story was there, then it was like, okay, well now we need to fill in these bits. Um, it wasn't intended to be anything at first.
Well, I should jump back. Where you did some AE work still in New York too?
Yes, yeah. The first thing I ever worked on was Tiny Furniture, Lena Dunham's movie. That was my first like real
How long were you on that?
the whole time. I mean, the whole time. It was I
I'm
don't know
curious
like
how
three,
long
four months.
how long their post schedule was, more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, it was unpaid, so they just fed me. But it was like a tiny group. This guy Lance Edmonds was the editor, and that was the first time that I think I learned to edit. I mean, like I'd been editing things for years before that, but that was when I learned how to really edit. I was like, oh, there's a system to this, because everything else I'd been doing was just kind of like just drag and drop and throw things together and shuffle things around and whatever.
Okay.
Um, and it was very interesting to see that. It was such a small group of people, like kind of like young filmmakers, but they were all super talented, and it
W-
was really great for that.
was Meeks Cutoff a similar situation?
Meek's cutoff of Tiny Furniture is because Lance had worked with the. It's so funny how they're all connected. I mean, and that's the film world, I guess.
Yeah.
Because Meek's cutoff was Anish Sawjani was the producer, who was the producer of I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. Like all of these kind of weird connections. But yeah, they need basically because when they saw that I was like a hard worker and I knew what I was doing, they started recommending me because I was doing it for free. They started recommending me for whatever, so I started getting little paid jobs. And Meeks Cutoff was also like their assistant editor on Meeks Cutoff had to leave, so I came on as the to replace him. But the edit was kind of close to done by it was like just the last few it was maybe like the last month of the editing for Meeks Cutoff, and then I was mostly just like delivery stuff and cleaning up the project.
So
Um,
when you left the Malick world, were you? I've thought you had shot some stuff already on your feature. Am I missing that, or were you about to go off and shoot some the initial stuff in Lithuania?
I hadn't shot anything. I was so after Squirrel, I had this revelation that was like, oh, I could if I use non-professional actors or friends, I could shoot a feature, funny, just natural light and just like very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and so I started doing that, and I have like terabytes of footage uh, with some very close friends in Austin. But Squirrel got into Berlin. I went to Berlin. I met a Lithuanian producer there, and the Lithuanian producer was like, "We could finance a feature for you in Lithuania." So everything basically. So then I kind of shifted gears to quickly write the story. I didn't when I was working for Terry, I didn't even have the idea of making a film in Lithuania. I had not no concept of it. And then when I met this right after my last day working for Terry, I got on the flight to Berlin, and
So how long
and
was the feature shoot? How long did that end up being?
we shot for 20. I think we had 27 shooting days,
Mm.
25.
Was it this was wasn't on this was off and on or not?
No, no, it was just one. It was a very standard kind of. I was there for 3 months of prep. So I mean, we shot the tree. I mean, like so. By the time I took 2 years to write the script, so I edited Kicks and I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, and this movie called Jonathan before I started shooting my feature. I mean, I was basically editing and writing after Malick, after working for Terry.
Okay, so after you, I guess I did have a question about the balance. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
is it just basically editing is the day job, and that can inform you and teach you more stuff, but it's obviously writing directing is the main thing.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I really enjoy editing. I've told there's several people that I would like uh, continue editing for regardless of success in directing. If I were to, be able to live purely off directing, but even I mean, like it's a tough thing. Like I could at this point, like I could just live in Lithuania and direct movies. That is, I mean, because it's cheaper to live there, and that's in Lithuania I'm a director, and my movie was successful enough over there to warrant a second. But there's something about being here and working on interesting projects of a bigger scale, of a bigger scope. There is something about that, like 3 months of like trying to understand and execute someone else's vision when you have a great relationship with that person is fantastic.
The fun thing I found with this is well, the tricky thing is like when you work with someone new, it's a new job, so you're tearing off the band-aid and you're
Hmm.
making a new working relationship. But at the same time, if they're good at something, you're going to learn what they're good at, and you're going to learn, and you can apply that to your
Absolutely.
craft, and you can whether you can apply that to your own stuff you're going to shoot or other stuff you're going to edit in the future. That's always
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
what was
Having a good, yeah, editing with someone that you get along with is fantastic.
yeah, that is a sweet spot. I wanted to talk about Kicks. Was that your
Uh-huh.
first? Was that your first feature you edited after?
No, so I was actually I man, no wonder my 20s ran by. I was editing, there was a movie called Macomb that I edited while working for Terry. I these
Oh, I
two
remember this one.
friends
I do remember this
self
one.
yeah, they self-financed uh very small budget. They shot it in Ghana and they wanted me to edit and I was like, "Well, I'm working 12-hour days, but I can give you an hour a night maybe." If you don't have a deadline. And so that's what I did. I edited after work, an hour or whatever.
I still have the same reaction when you told me that. That's insane. Like I can't. I have trouble writing whenever I'm working on someone else's stuff because my brain just has to like stay straight on it the entire time. Like multitasking's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, it was tough. Um, I actually think writing is harder when you come back from work than just like sitting down, because there's something with editing where the hardest part was just pressing the space bar to get the footage rolling. Once the footage is rolling,
You have natural instincts
you
of what to do.
automatically start being like, yeah, but writing to me, I'm more like writing after a long day of working is more difficult for me than,
That's
you know,
that totally
plopping something else in.
that totally makes sense. Then you got after. So I mean, but then what was Kicks like?
So Kicks was because I knew the director and the co-writer at AFI. I wasn't friends with the director, but we like, as he describes it, we appreciated one another from afar. He was a year ahead of me, and the co-writer was a friend of mine. They had to replace they were looking for a replacement for their editor, and they both wanted me to work on it, but the producers, there's like this thing with like indie producers where like if you haven't edited something in Sundance, you don't count. So they were very hesitant to hire me, but because Nakom,
I've had the
because I
experience
had,
where if you have edited something at Sundance, you still don't count.
yeah. Well, I mean, of course,
But
of course,
yeah.
this is, yeah. It's funny what editing is a weird job because like nobody knows what you've done, and
Yeah,
sometimes you haven't done anything and you get a lot of credit for it, and sometimes you did everything and you get no credit for it. So it's a weird,
that's well said.
yeah. I mean, it's true. There's certain sequences in movies that I've edited that people are like, "Man, that's great editing." And I'm like, "This is the easy stuff. Like that's like you just cut some pretty images together to music. Everybody's going to think you're a great editor." But like, there's certain performances that are like where you have to like really sculpt that performance. Where, I mean, that actor should be paying you, a cut of every paycheck. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Did I mean I remember sending you the like I really liked Kicks after I saw it. Was the Macon Blair movie the next one?
Macon Blair was the next thing after Kicks, yeah.
Okay. How was like? I remember we all have mutual friends. Julia Block edited
Right, right.
some of his performances,
Yeah, Macon wanted Julia to edit initially, wanted her to edit
and
Outfield him as well.
well, I remember specifically, Julie and I still talk pretty similar, or mostly through like
Hmm.
texts or something. But I remember texting her. I ran into Macon Blair at Austin Comics, and I texted her that exact sentence, and she said, "There's like 15 things in that sentence that makes her so happy." But I mean, like that was the only time I've ever met him. So like,
Hmm.
I mean, what was the experience like on that?
He's great. He's one of my favorite people. He's like one of those people that I'm like I'd always edit for him. I think it's rare to find someone like that who like really has a clear vision of what they want, is really has like a good sense of humor about things, is is very open. Like there's like no ego in his working. It's like there's like this perfect balance of really knowing what you want and not carrying like a massive sort of like ego and insecurity that like most, I'd say most creative people have some degree of that ego and insecurity that can create for like, it has to be my way. It's, you're almost used to when you're at someone's movies, like you see some things where you're like, okay, I know we're going to lose this scene or this dialogue, but it's going to take 3 months to get there. Something where it's like he's just like willing to look at anything, and there's plenty of stuff that we disagreed on initially and stuff like that, but there's just like such a smooth way of finding that balance. Yeah, and it was puzzling because like I'm not nearly as versed in the sort of the genres that Macon kind of grew up on and loves. But I think that was almost like a necessary balance for us to find because like there's certain places where he'd want to go too far and I'd maybe try to pull things back or try to like ground things a little more.
Did you find any of your like pulpy action movie instincts coming out at all a little too?
For sure, for sure. Because like editing that final action sequence was the most fun I've had. I've never edited anything like that, and it was a blast. And like I found like my inner teen, like preteen, giggling at like exploding or whatever it is. It was great. It
The
was really fun to edit.
I guess I don't know any. I haven't seen Jonathan. I don't remember when you were working on it.
Hmm.
So I guess can you tell me anything about that?
Yeah, it's great. It's a nice movie. Bill Oliver's actor. He's thing is and developing his second feature now. Also an AFI, but I got it through my agent, who's not personal connection. Yeah, it's kind of a rare. It's funny. The trailer would suggest this like kind of action thriller element to it, but it's a very slow burn, and it's nice to have. Like it's rare to see kind of American indies, even indies that like have that much sort of like patience and restraint. Shot by this guy Zach Cooperstein, who's a friend here in New York, who's become a friend here in New York. We shot a lot of great indie films, and just like you can really feel his touch on it as well. But it was very different. I mean, like that's a movie where there are parts where like it looks like I have to do like some like super fast cutting or something like that. But there was a lot of like very subtle sculpting work or like really subtle like you don't have a lot of places to cut. So it's and the director was very aware of things like continuity and pacing. Just like there was a lot of like particular things that were these kind of I'd say like restrictions in the edit. So you were doing very like kind of fine work, line performance from another, finding where they can like mix together to get like the right tone or something like that. But
Uh,
it's nice.
I did. I think. I guess I wanted to get your opinion because this is something that I used to talk about, although don't really have to talk about it anymore, just because
Hmm.
no agents calling me anymore. It's like that saying of like when they talked about '80s hardcore bands selling out. It's like you can't sell out if no one's buying. But how what is your opinion on your agent or just agents in general or editors taking agents?
I mean, mixed feelings. I mean, especially now you have like several agencies that kind of just like have gobbled up all of your below the line people. So like they don't have a huge incentive to be finding individuals work because they're getting their 10% from the editor or production designer or cinematographer regardless.
Okay.
At the same time, like I am not like I'm really bad at the business stuff. Like I would have edited Kicks for free. I mean, I got paid very little. And after that, the producers put me in touch, and she reached out. I was like, I think that was her first sign because she'd just been promoted, and so she knew the producers from New York, and they were happy with what they did. Yeah, there's this guy in Austin doesn't have an agent, and you should look at him. So at first she was very hungry, and she got me a lot of jobs because I was first sign, which was great. And it's nice to, I mean, I would not know how to handle some of these like negotiations and things. On the other hand, like, if it's a union film, like there's just a standard rate that you're going to get, and that's that. And so there's not that much negotiation involved. So I don't know the answer to that. I think that a lot of it's, I think the best opportunities are still going to come through people, because like it kind of like you're sure that you're gonna it's a much better chance of having the same sensibility, or I guess a
That makes
matching
sense.
sensibility.
That makes sense.
Because I've definitely had jobs through my agent that I was not happy about, even if not from like a tech. It's just like, oh, this is not the style of film that I want to be working on or something like that. And you read a lot of, and
Well, do you have
yeah,
to?
so
You're not ever going to have to go back to doing AE or stuff like that, are you?
no, no, I haven't done any AE work in a very long time.
There was another editor had on Robert Grigsby Wilson, who he had a movie at Sundance this year, and he was talking about just like the just kind of like wavering line where he's doing features, but he was doing everything, features, TV, but he
Hmm.
still had to dip his toe. And I knew him from a Facebook group of a lot of
Hmm.
like there's a certain line of indie editors that still have to dip their toe back to doing assistant editing just to get it, whether it's to get their health insurance or just they need a gig still too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm on a couple non-union things now, so
Mm.
for health insurance, it might be an issue coming up. But I've been, I mean, there's been like, there was a moment last fall where I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna have it. Like, my agent had kind of disappeared. Well, not disappeared. She like, she put me up for a couple things. One of them I got, but then they pushed. Another one I thought I'd got, but then I found something for myself on my own, and then all these other. And then once I told my agent like, "Hey, I'm booked until whatever it is, mid-March," then she sort of like got back, and then she started sending me all these scripts and everything. So I don't know if that's coincidence or not,
Hmm.
where it's like once she realized that I found something for myself. I mean, she's great. I do like, but she also has a lot of great clients, so she doesn't have like this like massive incentive to like be looking for work for me. And also, so like when I would come back from Lithuania, I'd be like, hey, I'm around, let me know if anything comes up. But I also then like have said no to some really, really great. I mean, I guess I hadn't gotten offers, but like even like reading scripts from like legitimate productions where I was just like, no, I'm going to be in Lithuania, or I'm going to this festival, or whatever it is. So I haven't been like the best client for her either. So I can't really be
Hmm.
super annoyed by that, especially after I Don't Feel at Home This World anymore won the grand jury prize at Sundance. Like before, literally like a month later, I went to Lithuania. So that's when I was getting all of these offers, or at least people were showing interest, and I just had to say no to a string of things for
Right.
for 8 or 9 months or something.
Um, so I can edit this out if you don't want to talk about this, but was there a movie you got fired off of?
Fire, yeah, yes and no. Yeah, so there's a movie that I I mean, we edited up to the date of my contract.
Oh.
And who knows? I mean, so basically, I was getting really frustrated by the movie and by the director. It was one of those situations where like this is a bunch of people that really care more about their title. So from producers to director, all down the line, like nobody was kind of being open about anything. It was really an eye-opening experience. But they and the financier just wasn't happy with the movie, and as these people do, they just like decide to throw money at the problem. And so after I left, they decided to reopen the edit with an extremely experienced, Oscar nominated, maybe Oscar winning editor that the financier had worked with before. And I talked to her a bunch of times on the phone and everything, and it sort of became clear that that's just what the movie is. I mean, she told them herself, like, there's nothing here that can be done. So they just, which was kind of a very validating thing for me because even the director called and was like, yeah,
Really? Okay.
yeah, yeah, unless he was blowing smoke up my ass. But everybody that I've talked to said that it hasn't really changed.
But I guess I've always been curious about editors being one of the first people on the chopping block whenever the movie isn't working, and like, but it sounds like from your experience, like you were kind of ready to go anyway.
Oh, I mean, that's one of the few times that I've been ready to quit a job. I was very frustrated by that experience. It was the sort of thing where, you're and you don't know how to play these power games, or it's not power games, like these politics. Because like we're on the speakerphone and the producer's like, okay, well, we need more close-ups in this scene. And the director's like, yeah, you're right, I agree. And I'm sitting there quietly like, we don't have any close-ups. No close-ups were shot. Why are you telling this person that you agree to that no? And you just sort of in like eventually I was just at some point and the way this director had been working, he was just throwing everybody under the bus. Like I'd see him talking to producers and he's like, oh, this is the production designer's fault, oh, this is the actor's fault. So I just like, and you hear on these calls how he's saying like, yeah, I agree, we should add more close-ups there, or yeah, we should lengthen that shot. And I'm sitting there quietly being like, well, we don't have close-ups and we don't have the foot, like we can't CGI a close-up, like it's not going to work.
One of our mutual friends was telling me he was on his job where he worked for like 7 days, and he finally had to sit the director down and say, "You understand, I can't create images. I just rearrange images, but I can't make something up new from scratch."
Yeah. I mean, look, I think a lot of it is personality match as well. Me and this director didn't like, I mean, we tolerated each other, but like it was very frustrating for me. I just come here in Eastern Europe and like he's a very LA guy and like if I don't like something, I tell someone that I don't like it. And like I could see from the beginning that me kind of sighing and being like, well, I don't think this is a good performance was not the way, like, and I saw how his friends would come in and be like, this is brilliant, but you know, and I just
Oh,
didn't function that way. And like, so he wanted to be told that he's like the next big thing. And so like, I think that this director was far happier to let the financier throw in, to like, throw away some more money to see if someone who cost, you know, God knows how much more than I do,
mm,
could fix things. But it's always a little validating when it was one of those things where when I was leaving, I had the sense like, cause when you've like finished something, and it didn't feel like we'd finished it.
oh,
Um, so I had a sense that this would happen, and again, having seen how this director had thrown other people under the, but like, I wasn't surprised by anything that happened, and it was one of those kind of good riddance moments.
So, I mean, Lithuania, I mean, seems to be coming up a lot in your stuff. Is it a chicken egg thing where like you have a base where you can keep making movies there if you want to, or is it something that's legitimately like this is just fostered from your in your DNA and you have literally and you have to write about and make movies about?
It's interesting. I mean, so much of what I've done is in some way related to it. I just think it was such a part of my identity growing up. That's like, my thesis film and stuff like that. It's just like there's something about that being like a stranger in your own world feel that even like that theme, because like, even like I was, raised in the US as an American, but my name is pronounced a little funny, and I feel like I'm from this, like, my home life was very different to anybody else's, and like the way my parents talked was different from everybody else. So I feel like that aspect of things is really just, inevitably part of my identity. And because I spent all my summers there growing up, I always kind of dreamed of a way that I could have like maintain that relationship with Lithuania. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. There's things that I love about it, and there's things that I don't. But it's very much hard to shake that part of me, I guess.
Are you working on the next feature out there?
Yes, we've got a few drafts written. We've gotten development money. We've found a few co-producers, European co-producers that are interested in moving forward, and we should know by the fall uh, if we're shooting. And the idea would be to shoot next winter.
Okay, cool. So, Tomas Vengris, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Cool.